But what is in a name? My name is Hazel, and I'm called Hazel because my mum and dad could not agree on a name to call me when I was born. So after many discussion, I am told I was called after my mum. So at the age of 45, I am called Baby Hazel or Wee Hazel to this day. And I'm just thinking that I had a birthday in March, but sure, I'm now 46. But what's a year between friends? I never remember my age. But even today, it's called Good Friday. And people often ask, why is Good Friday good when it involves a death? And not just the death of anybody, but the death of Jesus, God's Son. But of course, for Christians, Good Friday is Good Friday because Jesus not only experienced death, but he experienced the wrath of his own Father on him. As he was there naked on the cross, he was experiencing God's wrath for our punishment, for the things that you and I do, so that we would be given the opportunity to have a relationship with God, to know him the way he intends for us to know him, and of course then to go to heaven when we do pass from earth. So that's why it's Good Friday to us. But I wanted to just have a wee look at another person's name in the Bible who was in the Garden of Gethsemane on the night whenever Jesus was arrested. And sometimes there are somewhat insignificant seemingly people in the Bible. For example, the woman at the well, we never really know her name. And so this is a person who we do discover his name only in John's Gospel, and that's Malchus. And Malchus is AKA known as the man who got his ear cut off by Peter. Now, what do we know about Malchus? Well, not very much, to be honest. But we know that Malchus was the right-hand man to the high chief priest, Caiaphas. And he was the one that ran around the inner city of Jerusalem, finding out what was going on and running back to Caiaphas. So we'd say he was an informant. Now, there's good informants, there's bad informants. He wasn't a good one. You and I would probably call him a tout. He went back and told Caiaphas all that he needed to know, and Caiaphas then took action on that. So I am sure Malchus would have been around Jesus and the disciples, and they would have known who he was, because Caiaphas wanted to know who this Jesus of Nazareth was. He wanted to know what this miracle worker was doing and how people were responding to him. So Malchus would have heard what Jesus said, and he also would have seen what Jesus said. And I often wonder, did it ever make Malchus think, well, maybe this is true. Maybe Jesus is the Son of God. We don't know. But we do know that Malchus was this tout for Caiaphas. And so we also know that on the night that Jesus was going to be arrested, Malchus probably was in the thick of it. Because remember, he needed to do his job for Caiaphas. He didn't want to annoy Caiaphas. So he would have known the soldiers. He would have known the high priest, or the chief priests. So that night, when the officers of the chief priests and the Pharisees and the detachment of troops that we are told in John were set out to go up to the Garden of Gethsemane, Malchus was probably there with them. He probably walked up out of the city, up the Mount of Olives to that Garden of Gethsemane. He probably walked through that garden with the torches and the lanterns shining. He probably saw the silhouettes of the disciples getting up, because remember, they were praying at the time. Some of them, most of them at the time, had fallen asleep. But at this stage, they probably would have been getting up and coming around Jesus. He also would have seen the betrayal of Judas as he walked over and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed Jesus on the cheek. He would have seen all that. And I wonder what he was thinking. Was he intrigued by what was going to happen? Was he rubbing his hands with glee because Jesus was being arrested and he could go back and tell Caiaphas? We don't really know what he was thinking, but he was definitely there, because the next thing he knew was that he'd got his ear cut off by Peter. Now, why on earth did Peter cut his ear off? Well, Peter was impulsive. He's known for that, for saying things impulsively and for acting impulsively. But maybe he was trying to defend Jesus. Maybe he was trying to prove himself to Jesus, because Jesus had already told him that he was going to deny him, and Peter was adamant that he wouldn't. But already Peter had fallen asleep 3 times in the Garden of Gethsemane. He didn't want to disappoint Jesus again. So maybe that's why he did it. Or maybe Malchus was standing near Jesus and he was the closest person to Peter, or maybe just the closest person standing beside Peter. Because we're told in the other 3 Gospels that it's when the men put their hands on Jesus that Peter struck. Or one other wee idea is that Peter knew Malchus was the ears and the eyes for Caiaphas, and how ironic it would be for him to cut off an ear. And people think that Peter was quite strange to be carrying a knife, but Peter and the disciples a lot were fishermen, and so they were very savvy with a knife. They were very skilled, so off comes an ear. What was poor Malchus thinking? And I say poor Malchus because if you had your ear cut off, probably by one foul swoop, you'd be shocked. Was he shouting? Was he giving off? Was he looking for his ear? He probably was holding his ear because it was bleeding and the pain. But in the middle of all this, Jesus was going to his death. And he knew that because he had already prayed to God, "Father, if this cup can be passed from me, let it be." But God's answer was no. And very often to our prayers, he says no. But what did Jesus do when his Father said no? He rose up. He didn't want any fighting. And he said to Peter, "I must fulfill the prophecies." He was fulfilling the prophecies of the Old Testament, and he knew what he needed to do. He didn't resist God, he just did it. And on his way to his death, he wasn't just concerned about himself. He stopped to heal Malchus's ear. Now we're told in John that he touched Malchus's ear. So Jesus would have to have been no more than 2 feet away from Malchus, the one who was touting on him, the one who was running and telling the tales, and the one who maybe was wanting him arrested too. And he touched his ear. He had that personal touch with the one who was trying to destroy him. Can you imagine what it was like for Malchus in a state of shock because his ear is cut off? And yet Jesus, the Son of God, the one he's been following, is standing, looking at him eye to eye probably, and he's looking in to the Son of God's face. Eye to eye. I wonder what that was like for Malchus. Did it have any effect on him? I am sure it did. Because the question I ask is, can you not be affected by having Jesus there, by experiencing Jesus? But it all depends what we do with that. Nobody knows if Malchus became a Christian. And we know we have family, we have friends who know the gospel, who know that they need to ask Jesus for forgiveness, and they don't do it. But we just need to keep praying for them. But Jesus was showing Malchus that he even was concerned for him. He had love for him on his way to his death. And even in this world at the minute, in our situation, no matter what bigger issues we feel as humans are going on, God is more than powerful to know your needs. God is more than powerful to know what you're going through and what you need. So whenever you're feeling low or feeling as if the little things that are annoying you don't matter, remember that God is interested in you. Malchus's name means Melech in Hebrew. It means king. And there was 2 kings standing face to face. Malchus, a king, only a name, facing Jesus Christ, the King of all kings. This is Good Friday. And as a Christian, are you really thanking God for what Jesus did on the cross? For God allowing his son, saying no to his son. And for many of you who are mums know it's difficult sometimes to say no to children. But saying no to the prayer of your son and knowing that he's going to die for the people that you created. Are we thankful for that? Are we thankful for Jesus being naked on that tree, taking the wrath of God? And for anybody who maybe isn't a Christian, would this be a Good Friday for you, that you have asked Jesus to forgive you for your sins and you have that relationship with him so that one day you will experience the glories of heaven? And it's a wonderful hope to leave families. It's a wonderful assurance for you to know too. So what's in the name? It's all about Jesus. It's Good Friday. And we might think today's good, being Good Friday, but Sunday's coming, and it's even better.